Before we get started with this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out, I just want to make mention of the events of the last week. We all know in the hockey world about Kyle Beach, who bravely shared his story about the sexual abuse he endured at the hands of a video coach of the Chicago Blackhawks organization, and all the other events and the follow-up that has ensued after that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on everything that's transpired. I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge the bravery that Kyle did in bringing his story forward to TSN, and how it very much affected me. And I think everyone else on this panel as well, to a certain extent, were very affected by essentially everything that happened over the last week. And I can imagine that seeing a video and talking Canadiens right now might not feel like the most timely thing to do. You may be feeling upset. You may be feeling away about everything going on. But we just wanted to still acknowledge that this happened. And we understand if you have differing views on hockey culture as a result of what's happened since. And while this is a bit of an awkward transition to the Canadiens, there was some stuff that happened over the last week with the Montreal Canadiens. And myself and Stu and Rick and our special guest, Andrew Berkshire, we're going to get into all of that on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm Julian McKenzie, alongside two-thirds of our usual suspects, Rick Green, Stanley Cup champion assistant coach, Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, and Andrew Berkshire of the Game Over podcast. Also writes some stuff for the Montreal Gazette from time to time as well. I'm going to take this opportunity to do some promo for you, buddy. November 13th, you and I are going to be taking on the Hot Ones Gauntlet on your show. I am not looking forward to losing any taste in my tongue by tasting the hot sauce on the chicken wings, but I will do it for you because you are my friend.
It's going to be epic. We're going to probably die on stream, but that's all right.
We'll figure things out, Andrew. Speaking of figuring things out, the Montreal Canadiens need to figure things out with Cole Caufield, the super rookie who's supposed to be the goal-scoring phenom, lighting up the lamp. I picked him to win the Calder Trophy this year. And now he finds himself with the Laval Rocket, just in time for picture day with the team, by the way. What do you guys think of Cole Caufield being sent down to the American Hockey League after he only has like one assist in 10 NHL games this year?
Well, for me, I think if management had a choice, they would send 15 of them down to the minors and try and figure things out. But in all honesty, Cole Caufield, second leading with shots on goal. The kid is the least of their problems, other than the expectations were really high. Here's a young kid that hasn't found his touch yet, and he's got obviously all the tools to make things happen, and he hasn't had the success that everybody was hoping for. So listen, let him go down, let him play lots, let him get that feel back. He will get it. He's a competitor. He's a great kid. He's very, very positive from the standpoint he's going to go down and make the difference, and he'll come back strong. And he's going to be a big part of this Montreal Canadiens moving forward.
I was a little bit surprised that they made the decision, because it seemed to me just by the eye test that he was starting to figure things out a little bit. He was starting to make more of the plays that you expect Cole Caufield to make, a little more toe draggy, cutting to the net a little bit more often. But his shot selection hasn't been great at the NHL level overall. For whatever reason, the Canadiens haven't really made him the focus of their power play. So that kind of has not been part of his game so far this year. And especially early in the season, he was bobbling the puck a lot, right? Losing a lot of puck battles. I think his effort was always there, especially the back checking in the last few games. He was actually pushing play defensively a little bit, which is good to see. But it's not going to hurt him to spend a few games in Laval and get some more confidence and score some goals. I think the only way that this goes wrong is if they start to yo-yo him back and forth, up and down. And, with the injury to Jonathan Drouin last night, you saw a lot of people saying like, oh, well, I guess Cole Caufield's coming back up. I don't think so. I think this is one of the nice things about the Canadiens struggling to start the year, is that there's less pressure to pile on wins right now. They can allow him some space to grow in the AHL.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andrew. I don't think they sent them down just to call him right back up with injuries. They want him to go down there. Laval has a break in the schedule. They don't play again until the weekend on Saturday, so it's going to give them 4 or 5 days straight of practice. you got to remember his university schedule. That's what it was. University, they practice during the week and they play games on the weekend. There was a lot of talk of Cole Caufield coming up here and almost guaranteed he's going to score 30 goals in the NHL. First of all, there's not a lot of guys who score 30 goals in the NHL. And you got to remember, Caufield's never played more than 36 games in a season at university. It's a huge jump from university directly to the NHL. He looked good last season in the regular season. Not as good in the playoffs, but he played okay. But, defensemen now know more about him. There's more video on him. Guys know what he's going to do. Maybe if you're predictable at all in the NHL, defenseman will figure it out, as Rick Green, I'm sure, knows as well as anybody. But, he had lost his confidence. It was obvious. To me, he looked like he was timid. He looked like, I don't want to say he was scared, but he looked like he was trying to avoid hits when he could. And it was just things weren't getting better for him. So I think it was a good time just to send him down, give him a little break between games. I'm sure he'll be fired up to play on the weekend when Laval plays again. Let him go down there, score a few goals, get his confidence back, and bring him back up. I don't think there's anything wrong with what the Canadiens did. I think it's a smart move. You look back to previous Canadiens teams that used to win the Stanley Cup, Patrick Waugh, these guys, they all played in the minor leagues. They all came through there. They won championships in the AHL before coming up to the Canadiens. So, Dominique Ducharme likes to say there's no such thing as guys arriving too late in the NHL, but there is about guys arriving too early, and we've seen it in Montreal in the past with Victor Mete, Kotkaniemi. In hindsight, maybe they called him up a little bit too early. So let Cole Caufield go down there, let him get his confidence back. The kid can shoot, the kid can score goals. This is probably the longest scoring slump he's ever gone through in his life since he first started playing hockey. So just let him get a few more goals, get his confidence back, and come back. And he's shown that he can play in the NHL, but I think he's realizing now that it's maybe a little more difficult than he thought it would be, making the jump directly from NCAA to NHL.
And Stu, you did touch on the opposition is quite aware of Cole Caufield and what kind of player he is. So they're closing a lot of space on him. They're making things difficult for him. And this is, a learning curve for him to realize that he's up against a real strong opposition that's going to be really difficult for a small guy, but a quick guy. And he has had success at all levels. He's going to find his way to, to get to those areas that are going to allow him to use his shot and to find the net. And I think that it's going to be a good experience for him to go down and hopefully light it up and come back on a real positive note. And, hopefully by that time the team will be on a little bit more of a positive roll.
Yeah, I've seen a few occasions, Rick, where sort of big defensemen like Rick Green are sort of pinning him against the boards and sort of, you're not going anywhere type of thing. He's going to have to adjust to playing against, in the NCAA, there's some big, strong defensemen. In the NHL, they're nearly all big, strong defensemen. So he's just going to have to figure out a little bit ways to get away from those guys along the boards and create more space for himself. And
I think it's, it's not his game. Let's face it. Don't expect him to be, a machine along the boards. He's going to be smart. He's going to be quick. And everybody knows what his talent level is. Now he just has to figure out how to bring it each night. So he'll do it.
Yep. I think Cole Caufield will probably find a way to make that work from the AHL. I mean, in the few games he played in the AHL, he already looked pretty comfortable, and that was last season. Also, I wonder it's one thing to look at his size and the way that he looks in the NHL. I feel as if the fact that defenses know that the shot that he has is pretty lethal. I have to say, they're respecting, they're giving him back to, not to say the respect, but they know what they're up against with Cole Caufield. They've shown enough that they were able to game plan against him. Also, when they eventually call him back, the Canadiens should just have him just hang out with Mike Hoffman for an hour, because as we've raved about on the show, Mike Hoffman has an incredible shot. And Andrew, you brought the fact that, they haven't made Cole Caufield the focus on the power play. One good reason why lately, I think Mike Hoffman is a pretty good reason why they haven't made him the focal point on the power play. So yeah, just let Cole Caufield hang out with a guy who has the best shot on the team through the first few games of the season in Mike Hoffman. Then maybe we'll see him start to get that goal scoring touch back.
Well, Julian, the other guy that Cole Caufield is going to get to hang around with now is Ryan Poehling. They're going to be teammates down in Laval. And that's good for both of them. These are two guys who both now have something to prove. And now Ryan Poehling gets a chance to play with a guy with an elite shot, a goal scorer. And this is moving forward in the future. These are two guys who could end up playing together with the Canadiens. So I think that's another positive, sending Caufield down there, is have him and Poehling play together for 5, 6, 10, however many games he's down there. And I think they can both feed off of each other. And I said, two guys who have something to prove. if I'm those guys, I'm sitting down. Let's prove this together. Let's show that the Canadiens are wrong by having both of us down here and show them why we deserve to be back up with the big team.
Yep. I don't think we have to wait that long for Cole Caufield, but that's just my thinking. Let's move on to the next question with Nick Suzuki. He was a player who went off to a slow start himself, but he explodes for 3 points against the Detroit Red Wings earlier this week, gets himself a goal, scores 2 assists. I'm trying to remember how many points he's had in his last few games, but he's picked up his play as of late. What are your takeaways from Nick Suzuki's play against the Red Wings earlier this week, and do you think he's turned a corner?
Yeah, I think it's been a couple of games now, maybe like 4 or 5 games, where you can kind of see the ascension of his game. And with Suzuki, the defensive play has always been there. Even this year when he was struggling, like the defensive play was not an issue. It's that he focuses so much on being solid defensively that typically throughout his career at even strength, he's sacrificed offensively. So he scores a little bit less at even strength than we would expect for somebody of his skill level, but it's because he's pushing so hard to be such a responsible player in his own end. And I think that's part of why the coaching staff loves him so much, right? He's at such a young age willing to make that sacrifice to the counting numbers to be a team player. But this season, he was very tentative in the offensive zone. He seemed to be, anytime he had a chance to cut to the inside or the outside, he was taking the outside. Now you're seeing more of his touches are quick, incisive passes, or he's getting to the middle of the ice. You look at him, he's driving the net, and you see more of the playoff Suzuki coming out. It's hard to say like one game of 3 points is a turning point, but at the same time, now he's up to 8 points in 11 games. He's only got 1 goal, but the counting numbers are starting to come up for him, and the defensive play hasn't fallen off. So this team it goes as Suzuki goes in a lot of ways offensively, right? So the fact that he's actually taking off a little bit is really good news for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think his play along with Brendan Gallagher were the big keys against the Red Wings.
Yeah, Andrew, you made a good point there. You talked about him going to the outside, as I mentioned earlier. If you become predictable in the NHL, they're going to find it on video, and defensemen, if they know what you're going to do, it obviously makes their job a lot easier. But the thing I really admire about Suzuki, I like him on and off the ice. Like the way he criticized his own game after the game in Anaheim, saying it's probably my worst game ever. It's rare to hear any player talk publicly like that about his own play. Never mind a kid who's 21 years old, but he's mature beyond his years, both on and off the ice. And I asked him about it after the Red Wings game. I said, I admire the fact that he does that, and where does that come from? And he spoke about how it's so important to be able to self-evaluate your game and be honest with yourself and know when you're not playing well. And like that's a coach's dream, I'm sure, Rick, when you were coaching, a player who realizes what he's doing wrong and wants to get better. And the thing with Nick Suzuki, he always seems to be able to bounce back. Whether he has a bad game or a couple of bad games, he always seems to bounce back. And a lot of it, I think, Andrew, has to do with what you said. He's so solid in a 200-foot game that the defensive part of his game is always there. It doesn't suffer, and the offense is eventually going to come. So, Nick Suzuki is a really good hockey player. He's mature beyond his years, and I don't really worry about him. Every player goes through slumps like this, but he seems to be able to figure out how to get out of them. And as Dominique Ducharme has said several times, Suzuki's problem is sometimes he tries to overthink the game. His hockey IQ is so smart, and as Ducharme says, he doesn't have to overthink it because the mental game comes naturally to him. Just focus on his compete level, keep working hard both ends of the ice, and let things flow more rather than overthinking things. And that's a young player, but he realizes that. And, as I said, Nick Suzuki, there's a reason why the Canadiens were willing to take a gamble, a $63 million gamble on him moving forward. And that's a big part of it because they realize he learns from his mistakes and he continues to improve. And we're seeing that again right now.
And we have to understand there's another young guy playing in a really difficult position. And, here's a kid that, we all really have good feelings for because he's a character kid and he knows, obviously, and he, as Stu said, he admitted against Anaheim that he has to be a lot better. And, he found a way through some video meetings and, just looking at his overall play that he needed to get better in a lot of areas. And one area that I saw that he excelled very well in is he seemed to be skating better. He seemed to be involved more and on his toes to jump into those areas and, make things happen. So that comes with confidence. That comes with ice time. He played over 18 minutes. He's I think, turned the corner as far as what he needs to do and not do. He has all the tools, and now obviously he's going to be a big part to keep this streak going and to keep his A game progressing to the point where he's going to contribute each and every night, because he's a good player. He's stumbled a little bit now. The game against Detroit is going to help him, and he will do well next game, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, he went from winning 25% of his faceoffs against Anaheim to I think it was 65% against Detroit. Of course, he wasn't going up against Ryan Getzlaf like he was in Anaheim. But, Nick Suzuki, the faceoffs have been a problem for him, and he knows that as well as anybody. And I think he went into the game against Detroit. He knows he's not going up against Ryan Getzlaf in the faceoff circle. And I think he was determined he was going to have a good night in the faceoff circle, and he did. So kudos to him for being able to do that.
And we probably should have all expected from the outset that Suzuki was going to struggle to the start of the season, right? Because I think people underestimate generally how much insulation Phil Deneau provided for Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi. That top line for the Montreal Canadiens over the last 3 years that now only Gallagher is left was actually one of the best lines in the league, not just in terms of controlling play from a shot perspective, just straight in terms of goals. I believe they were third or fourth in the entire league over the last 3 years at controlling the highest percentage of on-ice goals for at even strength. That's crazy for a team that was only mediocre over that time, aside from the Stanley Cup final run there. They were incredible. And to lose 2/3 of that line is a big blow for the Montreal Canadiens. And Nick Suzuki has now had to take on those top line matchup minutes, along with having, dealing with a rookie winger in Cole Caufield at the start of the season. There's been some changes in who's on his line. I think adding Gallagher to that line was a really good decision by the coaching staff, because it adds another player who adds in the transition game, who is responsible defensively, and creates some chaos in the offensive zone. As much as people haven't been too thrilled with Gallagher's game so far this season, he's yet again doing Brendan Gallagher things. The Canadiens are outscoring opponents by double while Gallagher's on the ice. It's just what happens his entire career. Even if he's not putting the puck in the net, Brendan Gallagher has an impact.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm glad you brought up Danault, because I roll my eyes hearing on social media people, Danault's overrated. They only look at his stats. Danault brings so much more to a team than that. He generates offense by getting the puck out of the defensive zone. And getting Gallagher and Tatar on the move. That's one of the reasons. That's a big reason, or the main reason, why that line was so effective for so long. Danault doing all the dirty work to get the puck up the ice and give these guys the offensive opportunities. And you're right, he did shelter Nick Suzuki a lot. Philip Danault took all the tough defensive zone faceoffs. He was up against the other team's top player every night. Now a lot of that's coming out to Nick Suzuki. It's a learning process. I mean, Nick Suzuki is going to be, I think, a really, really good centerman in the NHL, but it's a learning process, and he's had a lot put on him this year, a lot of pressure put on him, not just the contract, but the new role he has without Philip Danault to lean on. So that's a really good point you made there, Andrew.
If all goes well with Carey Price, who is currently in the NHLPA's player assistance program, he could be out of it by this weekend and available to the Montreal Canadiens. Mind you, he's recovering from knee surgery. He hasn't skated all of training camp. So I'd be very stunned if all of a sudden, as soon as he got out of the program, he was ready to play next game. But the Canadiens could sure use him right now. Can the Canadiens salvage their season with Carey Price back in the lineup and him playing well? Or is this season already over?
Well, it's almost impossible to come back from a 2-8 start. If you do the math, it took 98 points the last time it was a full NHL season to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So do the math, how many points they need. It's going to be almost impossible. And Carey Price is not going to be the savior. As you mentioned, Julian, he's still recovering from his knee surgery. Before he went into the player assistance program, I think he'd been on the ice maybe twice, hadn't practiced with his whole team. So it's not like, I imagine he hasn't been skating. And I don't know. First of all, I hope Carey Price is everything. Whatever he had to deal with, he's dealt with. I hope he comes back. I hope everything's good with him and his family, and everything's good, and he took care of what he had to take care of. But from a hockey perspective, he's not just going to put on the pads and jump right back into a game. It's going to be conditioning. It's going to be the knee. How is the knee doing? It's going to be getting back into practices. I would imagine they're going to have to send him to Laval to play at least maybe a game or two to get back into game action and get the feel. So whenever he does rejoin the team, I'd have to think he's minimum 2 weeks and probably a month away from being ready to actually play. And you got to remember also, last season, the last few regular seasons, Carey Price has been very inconsistent. That's before even the knee surgery. He was great in the playoffs last season. We saw the old Carey Price, but the last 2 or 3 regular seasons, he's been very inconsistent. He isn't any younger. He's coming off the knee surgery. He also had a hip issue last year. So Carey Price isn't going to come back in here and be the savior of this team. If he can play like he did last year in the playoffs, he's certainly going to help. But this team has dug such an early hole that it's almost, I mean, it's basically impossible for them to dig themselves out of it.
Oh, I think there's a positive in the fact that, you know, Carey has you know, left the rehab after 30 days. So that being said, there's obviously his mental side of of his well-being is better. Questioning his, you know, his physical condition, all his injuries that have been, you know, plaguing him for a number of weeks now. I don't know just where exactly he's going to be, but that's a positive to have him, you know, in the works, so to speak. How long it's going to take for him to come back and be able to play is a big question mark. And how healthy is he? And you know, we'll see that sooner than later, but it would be a real long shot to see if they could put a roll on and you know, get on a roll and make a real good push to get into the playoffs. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but we've seen it before with this team, obviously with different players, that anything can happen. But for me, the bottom line is seeing Carey Price feeling better as a young man and an athlete, and hoping him the very best. And you know, obviously, if he can step in there and pick up where he left off, is nothing but huge for the Canadiens as they continue to play this grinding season.
I'm kind of two minds with this, because I think that if Carey Price is healthy, you know, healed up physically and mentally for the first time, and let's say that this has been something that's been plaguing him for the last 3 seasons, maybe he can be back to the Carey Price that we've expected to see during his prime. It's happened before. You see, like, when Pekka Rinne finally recovered from all those hip surgeries and he had that Vezina winning season, which was, you know, absolutely incredible for the Nashville Predators. So it could happen. And the other thing is that the Atlantic Division, most of the teams in there outside of Florida have not gotten off to a great start. Usually a 3-8 start is not something that's recoverable for an NHL team, but they only need to be better than one of Boston, Toronto, and Buffalo. And those teams have between 4 and 5 wins. And I expect the Sabres to fall off as the season goes on. That's already started to happen. Toronto's doing all right. Boston is probably safe, but like, there's a chance there to sneak in if they go on a run. I think my question is, considering the schedule they've had so far, where they've played 11 games, which is the most in the division, only played playoff teams from last season twice, is it possible to expect that level of dominance over the rest of the season if Carey Price even is in Vezina form? And at the same time, is it worth it? Because they're in a position now for a draft in Montreal where they could be in lottery position, really make a serious improvement to this team. If Price comes back and puts them back into the middle of everything and they just miss the playoffs, that seems like the recipe for the same thing that we've seen over the last several seasons, where they just don't make a lot of progress overall as an organization.
The other thing that's going to be interesting when he comes back is, I mean, we don't know what Carey Price is focused on, but I mean, the Olympics might still be in the back of his mind. He might want to play for Team Canada. He might want to prove that should still be the goalie for Team Canada, which would obviously be good for the Canadiens if that's part of the motivation he has. But the thing, as far as the Canadiens coming back, you got to realize they rank near the bottom of the league on the power play, penalty killing, face-offs, goal difference. Like, Carey Price isn't going to fix the power play. He's not going to fix the penalty killing. He's not going to fix most of the problems with this team. And Jake Allen has played pretty well. You know, he's got 2 shutouts in his last 3 games. So it's the goaltending, you know, Jake Allen's done well. So it's not like Carey Price isn't going to come in and fix all the other stuff that's wrong with this team.
Yeah. One other thing I should mention about Carey Price, I'm not sure if everyone knows this. I'm pretty sure we all know it, but for people watching this video who don't necessarily know, with regards to Team Canada, he is on Canada's Olympic long list. I believe they took out a special exemption for him to be part of it. So he is among the 6 goaltenders on that 55-man long list for Team Canada. So if Carey Price is ready and healed up and ready to go, I would expect him to be ready to go play with Canada in China in February. But that just, we have to account for the fact that he has to get out of the program first. He has to be healed up. He has to be ready to go. And yeah, that's just what has to happen for him before we can even think of Carey Price being ready for the Olympics. I want to focus on the start, though. I want to focus on the 3-8 record for the Montreal Canadiens. It's not a great look at 11 games at all. And yes, Andrew, you do make the point that there are some teams that have slightly more wins than the Montreal Canadiens do, so there is a chance they could come back. But 3-8 is still a bad start. How much of this is on the coaching staff? How much of this is on Dominique Ducharme and the rest of his assistant coaches behind the bench?
I mean, I've been there before, and I'll tell you what, it's not a very nice situation. And hey, the coaches have to be held accountable for what's going on. They're the ones that drop game plans. They're the ones that put players on the ice. They do everything to prepare their team to play. And if it continually gets bad like it has been, then, you know, the bottom line is somebody has to hear about it. And I remember Claude, Julian and I sitting in the video room, and Bobby Gainey came down a number of times when we were struggling just before we got our walking paper and said, guys better get it going. And, you know, it comes with the business. Not saying that, you know, these coaches, after just signing new contracts, that they're on the hot seat, but they have to be held accountable. And I'm quite sure there's a lot of video sessions that are going on an individual and team basis to try and get these guys to play the right way. But I'll tell you what, it's really difficult. Your hands are tied as a coach. You're giving these guys information, what you believe is the right information, and it doesn't work. You start to get some doubt, and you get some concerns about your relationship that you have between player and coaches. So it can be turned around. It's happened before, but it's not a pleasant situation. But the point being is coaches are accountable for what's going on, and you don't sleep very well at night knowing that the team is doing what they're doing, and you're reaching in all areas to try and figure out, okay, what can I come up with next? It is not fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine the stress of that. I think that the coaching staff bears a large part of the blame in terms of the power play and penalty kill, right? Like those things have been issues for the Montreal Canadiens for multiple seasons now, and now multiple coaching staffs. You know, we saw a bit of a bump last year when Alex Burrows came in on the power play, and then it leveled off and it was the same. But I look at this team, and I look at teams like the Buffalo Sabres or the New Jersey Devils, and is there that much talent gap between the Montreal Canadiens and those teams, especially the Sabres without Eichel, who are able to form a functioning power play? It's been better lately, which has kind of been the Mike Hoffman effect, but you still look at the power play and the tactics are not great. Penalty kill, same thing. They're just very weak at closing off passing lanes, getting caught chasing. So that stuff, I blame the coaching staff for sure. But at the same time, I find it tough to put too much blame on the coaching staff for the roster that they were handed. You know, it's not Dom Ducharme's fault that the Canadiens saw Shea Weber dealing with pain on a daily basis that was probably going to push him into retirement for 5 years and didn't really make any moves to replace him, you know? So that, from that perspective, overall, I think the struggles of the team don't really fall at the feet of the coaching staff, but there's still things that they should be doing, should be working on, that have been going on for a long enough time that we should see improvements.
Are you saying David Savard isn't the same type of player as Shea Weber, like Dominic Ducharme said in his golf tournament this summer? I think we're seeing pretty clearly that that's not the case. You know, 2 of the 3 Canadiens wins are against the Red Wings. The Red Wings are this year's version of the Vancouver Canucks for the Canadiens. It looks like they beat up on them and struggle against everybody else. But the thing is, Dominique Ducharme's system seems to be very complex. There's many different options for breakouts. There's different options for forecheck and neutral zone play, and he wants guys to figure it out, that it just comes naturally, but it doesn't seem to come naturally. And last year when he took over, he had no training camp. They struggled with getting his system to work. It finally clicked in the playoffs, and we saw that it worked very well. Now you lose like 7 guys from that team. Weber and Byron and Danault and all these guys, Edmondson, all these guys are gone.
Corey
now
Perry
come in, Corey Perry, all these other new guys come in, and now they got to start from point A with what seems to be a complex and if not complicated type of system, and they seem to be struggling to figure it out. And I think that's the reason why they look so scrambly all over the place. You know, you wonder if maybe he needs to dumb it down a little bit and maybe eliminate some of the options and make things more simple for these guys. But his system works, and it showed last year in the playoffs that it works. But it's now they're right back to that area where they were last season, where too many guys are just trying to figure out where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do. Ducharme's talked about Nick Suzuki overthinking the game sometimes. I think a lot of guys on the ice are overthinking the game instead of just stuff coming naturally to them. So, at least this season they have a lot more practice time than they did last season with the condensed schedule. But there's a lot of guys, I think, that are still trying to figure out, should I be here? Should I be there? And I think that explains why they look so scrambly all over the ice. But, as Andrew mentioned, though, that doesn't really impact on the power play. The power play should be a lot more simple than the actual 200-foot game. And they're struggling with that also. And I agree that has to come on the coaching staff. And again, with Ducharme's system, I mean, his hockey IQ is like Dominique Ducharme lives, breathes, eats, sleeps hockey. It's obvious, and he's passionate about it. But that system, it seems that guys are just, the new guys especially, are just trying to figure out exactly how it works.
Yeah. Still a lot of games to be played for them to figure it out, though, at least. Rick, do you have a point you want to make?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you struggle, you look at your system, you look at the details of the game, you look at what has given you success before. And the root of the problem when the system isn't working is really the desire of each and every one of those guys in the dressing room to really go that extra to make the difference between winning and losing. And I'm talking about battling, competing, pushing guys off the puck, being really involved. And what I'm a little disappointed with is the uninvolvement, if you will, of a lot of their players. Whatever system you're using, you have to push your very best at the opposition to win battles, to be better than the guy you're playing against. And I just have a hard time watching a lot of guys being very passive, uninvolved, and not really interested in going that little extra to make the difference, especially when you're struggling. So they got to really, look at each other and say, listen, you got to be a lot better if we want to get this thing going for an extended period and really get involved and pay the price and block shots and do all those small things with desperation that's going to allow them some success. And until they figure out that desperation is the key word here, they're not going to win their share of hockey games. And I don't see enough desperation. I don't see enough urgency overall with each and every one of their guys, no matter who they have in their lineup.
That urgency, sorry, Stu.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
That urgency or intensity or compete level really, for the first time this season, was apparent in the win against the Red Wings. Right from the drop of that puck, they were on it. They were winning all the battles. They were winning the foot races. You could see they always had their sticks on inside position. It was like the first game this season where the Canadiens looked like they did during the playoffs last year.
It was a full 60-minute effort.
Yeah, it was great. They didn't let off the gas in the third period. The shot attempts in the third period at even strength were 16-4 for the Canadiens, despite being up 2 goals. Like they did the things that we expect them to do. And it was a shorthanded Detroit team. Of course, you have to account for the fact that Bertuzzi wasn't there. Larkin wasn't there. That's huge for them. But not like the Canadiens haven't been shorthanded as well. They're missing players too. So that was encouraging. What I want to see is that effort be rewarded in the next game. Build on that instead of the one bit of, energy in that one game and then kind of go back to the low-level energy that we've seen so far this season. I think that it's unfair to expect them to be that good every night, but the effort has to be there. And I think Rick's completely right that the compete level has just flat out not been good enough this season. So we can talk about systems for sure, and there are issues, but there's more to it.
And I don't think the game has changed that much from our era back in the time when, when we struggled, we looked around the dressing room and we found ways to get it straightened out through, extra effort and just a big time level of compete. And they're going to have to do it. And if they don't do it, it's not going to be very fun to watch.
In the end of the day, it comes down to one-on-one puck battles, right? You got to win your one-on-one battles for the puck, and the Canadiens haven't been winning enough. But what really impressed me the game against Detroit is Josh Anderson. He came out and he played like he was pissed off. Right from the opening, he was like, enough of this. And he was dominant the whole game. And I think a lot of the other guys on the team fed off of that, and we saw it through the whole 60 minutes.
That's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Andrew, thank you for stepping in for Jessica Rusnak as she continues her visual away from us on the show. We'll be back, I promise, but you know, she's got other things she's got to take care of. And of course, thank you to Stu and Rick as always for being on. Faithful soldiers that you are. And you too at home watching every episode that we do, you too are faithful soldiers as well. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. MontrealGazette.com/newsletters is where you can find the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. And you might as well check out HockeyInsideOut.com. They've got a lot of cool stuff up there for you to read, for you to watch, and for you to peruse at your own will. Peace.